Are we alone in the universe? A question that has preoccupied human minds for a millennia. But what has the Catholic Church to say about extraterrestrials? The answer may surprise you. Time to explore things visible and invisible. Dr. Paul Thigpen is a retired theology professor and the best-selling author of over 60 books, including the intriguingly entitled Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the Catholic Faith. Are we alone in the universe with God and the angels? And he joins me down the line from his home in Georgia. Paul, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Sean, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Paul, extraterrestrials in the Catholic Church, surely an oxymoron.
Well, some folks might think so. My specific field of study is historical theology, which just means the study of Christian thought across time in history. And one of the things I find in that field is that we often have assumptions about what a religion or other body of thought does or doesn't talk about, simply because of the current conversation. But I like to say that if you've ever gone to a party, maybe a little bit late, and you walk in and you see a group of friends and you walk over to talk to them, and they're talking about something fascinating and you have a point to make and you make it, and then they look at you and say, he just said that 5 minutes ago. You say, oh, okay. And then you make another point. Oh, well, he already said that 10 minutes ago. That walking in late on a conversation is, you need some background. And as it turns out, the Catholic Church, it's 2,000 years old, has a very long intellectual tradition talking about important issues that you might not think about right away. And a big portion of the book is talking about how the conversation about the Christian faith and the possibility of non-human intelligence is a very old conversation. It goes back to the early centuries of the Church, and even before that to the time of the Greek and Roman philosophers.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Paul, because in the modern thought, this kind of conversation about extraterrestrials, that sort of thing, seems to be a rather modern phenomena and is often posited in a way to debunk religion in general and Christianity in particular. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, it is. And again, it's unfortunate if folks had the time, they could read my book and other sources too, to see that this is a subject that has been tackled by Catholic thinkers, some very prominent ones, and at least commented on by popes and saints. And so it's not something that would, as some people think, would undermine the Catholic religion if we were to have hard proof that non-human intelligence exists. In fact, it's part of Catholic faith that at least one form of non-human intelligence exists, and that's angels and their fallen counterparts, demons. So that's not even in itself a totally foreign concept, nor was it to the Jewish people before the beginning of the Christian era. So what you find that there are actually folks like St. Augustine, St. Jerome in the early years, and so we're talking about in the 4th century, and all through the history of the church since then, for centuries, who have thought deeply about this matter and talked about it. That surprises us, but in part it surprises us, I think, because our culture has tended to minimize the importance of history. But actually, history has an awful lot to teach us. We don't want to walk in on the end of a conversation.
Yes, I mean, just as you're talking, Paul, I'm thinking that for Catholics, it's not much of a stretch, really, to go from angels and the angelic realm, if you like, to the idea that there are other beings in other realms. But, I mean, there's also references to this in the New Testament, isn't there? Doesn't St. Paul at some point talk about thrones and dominations, etc.? Is that a sort of veiled reference, do you think, to this type of thing? Could it be?
Certainly the long tradition of the church is that, going back at least to Pseudo-Dionysius, so that's a major thinker of the ancient period, that these are descriptions, those words have to do with what's called a hierarchy of angels, that I mean, St. Thomas Aquinas, one of our great thinkers from the Middle Ages, talked about how each angel is so individual that he's something of a species on his own. And so what that does, that line of thought allows for lots of possibilities of the angelic realm. I tend to think, as the church has traditionally interpreted, that powers, dominions, those other things are talking about different realms of angels. But it does open up the door to realize that there are all kinds of possibilities that we haven't even thought about, probably most of us, that there's a variety beyond just what you might see in contemporary sacred art of, angel, demon, of all kinds of powers that are out there we're not completely, understanding. So I do think that those probably refer to angelic kinds. But you have St. Augustine back in the fourth century talking about that there was so much evidence for other kinds of non-human intelligence from the eyewitness testimony of people who had encountered them. And he was talking in particular about creatures that would have given rise to the Greek mythology, that he thought it would be foolish to deny that such things exist. St. Jerome, about the same period, so we're talking about the fourth century, the 300s, writing about a similar thing, a whole letter where he's talking about the life of a saint. And in it, the saint meets up with two characters that we would have considered from Greek mythology, and has a conversation with them. And then afterward, he says, for my readers who think that's, it's not true, and then he ties it to an historical event about the time he was born and says, no, these things are real. So these two figures I just mentioned, St. Augustine was one of the greatest theologians of the Catholic Church, and St. Jerome, who's known as the father of biblical studies, because he translated the Bible into Latin, and that was used by the church for many centuries. If those two folks who knew the Catholic faith so well could think that other kinds of human intelligence non-human intelligence besides angels exist, that to me is pretty good evidence that you can't just say, oh, that's heretical, or that's not true, that these thinkers allowed for it. And I think the Catholic faith does allow for those possibilities.
I mean, there's one side, Paul, which is that a philosophical discussion about the nature of being and the possibility of extraterrestrials. I get that, and that's something which all philosophy, ancient philosophy, there's always been this kind of debates around different types of being. But how does that sort of, if there was such extraterrestrial beings, how do they kind of fit into Catholic theology? Do you know what I mean? Which is about redemption of this world, redemption of human beings in this world. How do creatures from other planets, how does that sort of fit together with what's in the sacred scriptures?
That's an excellent question. And a large part of my book is about that. The first part's the history we were talking about. But the second part says, okay, where would this fit into Catholic and more broadly Christian theology? And I think the first thing we have to say is that from a Catholic and Christian point of view, that whatever is out there has been created by God. That's kind of the foundational insight. There was a time when Saint John Paul II, that many of your viewers will recall him, was having a public audience at a parish in Rome, and taking questions from the audience. And one young girl said, "Holy Father, what about aliens?" And his response was very telling to me. He didn't say, "Oh, that's contrary to the Catholic faith," or "we don't know," or whatever. He said in a very positive way, "Always remember they are God's children too." And that's a beautiful insight, that if we truly believe that the creator of the universe, God, is a loving God, and he creates all things for a purpose, even though some of them turn away from his purpose, that the first thing we start with is whatever we encounter out there, it's something he's created. Now, does that mean that it's automatically friendly? No, not necessarily. The demons he created too, but they fell. They turned away from him, and now they have great malice toward us. But again, the foundational insight that whatever's out there, God has created. Second is that he's nothing is impossible with him. Our traditional Catholic teaching is that the only thing impossible to God is something that's contrary to his own nature. And so in other words, God can't actively do evil because he's all good. He can't do anything contrary that way. And and that he can't do anything that's inherently illogical. But we won't go into that. But the other thing is that I'm saying is that um, there were discussions back in the Middle Ages of whether it was possible even for God to create other worlds and other intelligent races. And finally, a bishop came out, is the Bishop of Paris, of France, and said, "Look, God, all things are possible with God. So you can argue how you want, but don't try to argue that God couldn't do this. It would be impossible to him. Of course, he can do it. He's God." St. Thomas Aquinas, in many ways, had a similar kind of discussion, although he wasn't thinking so much about extraterrestrials because the way of thinking back then about the universe was deeply rooted in Aristotle and Plato, the Greek thinkers who thought that Earth was the center of the universe, and planets for them were just wandering stars. They didn't even know that they could be rocky or gas balls with things living on them, perhaps. So all that to say, those are some of the foundational insights. Then to get into something else that you mentioned is, so how does that fit with the story of redemption according to Christians on this planet? And the answer is it could fit in several different ways. There's some who would say that what happened on this planet according to Christian teaching, that God himself came to earth, became a man in Jesus Christ, that we had fallen and turned away from him at the beginning of our human history, and therefore we needed a redemption, a buying back, a healing of who we are. We have become broken in so many ways, and that he came to do that, and he did it for all humankind. So there's some who would say the effects of that would ripple out to any other intelligent creatures in the universe if they also needed help. That's one possibility. Another would be that I think it's if you look at all the doctrinal statements, official statements of the church, that the Christian faith is for humanity, but it doesn't really say anything explicitly about whether would be for other races. In that case, then, a lot would depend on the condition of those other races. Have they fallen morally the way we have, or did they never turn away from God, in which the case they would need redemption? Or if they have fallen, could God have saved them, had his own program for them, so to speak, his own plan, save them in a different way? And again, St. Thomas Aquinas talked about that. Yeah, God could save us in a different way. He's God. He can he can figure another way. Could he have even God have done it a different way, perhaps even a way like he did here with an incarnation, he became one of those creatures himself in order to redeem them. A lot of Christians are probably uncomfortable with that, but again, some of the thinking of St. Thomas Aquinas, some of our great saints and thinkers, would certainly allow for that possibility, that he could do that, and it wouldn't be inherently impossible for him, nor would it be contrary to his nature. So what that means, I think, and in my book, I stay away from saying it's absolutely like this. What I try to do is to say, all right, even within the confines of a traditional Catholic teaching of the church and the examples of the saints and others, that certainly there are multiple possibilities. And we don't have to, if we want to be faithful to the teaching of the church, we don't have to deny the existence of non-human intelligence. We don't have to say, as some of my critics say, that any kind of encounter people have with what they think is non-human intelligence, that it has to be demonic. It can't be anything else.
So, Paul, essentially what you're saying is that it is an open question for the Catholic Church, whether aliens exist or don't exist. It's never been defined by the sounds of things. I mean, presumably the Catholic Church has never in any document said anything one way or t'other about extraterrestrials.
What I guess it's important, to understand about Catholic teaching, that there's a whole hierarchy kind of the authority of teachings. So when we talk about infallibility, that's a very narrowly defined thing that has to do with the ancient unbroken tradition of the church and with an ecumenical or worldwide council making definitive statements, what we call dogmatic statements, just in the sense that everything's defined. For a pope doing that on an occasion, which is a pretty rare occasion. Then you have other below that kind of levels of authority in the documents that we have to take very seriously, but they're not the same thing as infallible. And then below that, you might have letters, things said, so for instance, when you get to a pope on taking a plane ride, and he makes a comment to the reporters that that's an interesting thing, but there's no claim that there's any kind of authority in that, except that just he said it, so we all listen to it. So all that to say, not that I've been able to find has the church ever made certainly no dogmatic, definite, formal definition of a teaching saying it's impossible. There have been some occasional statements that have been made that have been misinterpreted, I think, that way. And you have, some of the opposition against Galileo when he was trying to demonstrate scientifically that we weren't at the center of the universe, all those things. And in fact, the way the church came around on that, first of all, never had a dogmatic statement, a defined statement saying he's wrong, but you had the individuals involved in his case or making a case. Immediately you had his apologist, I think at least one of them was a Franciscan writer who just talked about how what Galileo is saying is not contrary to the faith, it's not contrary to scripture, it's just contrary to Aristotle. And I think that was an important point. And before long, the church was able to see, yeah, that's not really part of our faith, no matter how common the idea might have been. So I think we're in a situation like that now where folks need to understand is the church has not formally defined anything to rule it out. The church has, I think, very wisely, remained silent about it. There's some indicators that, at some points in history that the church may have, or church figures may have actually received information about things that would confirm it, but for whatever reason have decided not to not to talk openly about that. I think primarily so that a secular government would do it first and then they could respond.
Well, unfortunately, we have to come right down to earth again, Paul, because the clock has beaten us at this point. Tell people where they can find out more about you and where they can pick up a copy of your very intriguing book.
Thank you. It's published by Tan Books, T-A-N. So tanbooks, all one word, .com. Go there and just put my name in and there'll be several books up, but you'll see it. And I don't have a website or anything like that, but you can pick up a lot of information at that site.
For now, Dr. Paul Thigpen, thank you very much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.